Witness One here. Let me tell you guys about the time when I became homeless and I had to live down in Hamilton, Montana. Look at them gang stalkers. I'm sure they COINTELPRO'd it right there. Guys in the vans. You always got to look out for the guys in the vans. That's where they're transporting the stronger weapons, the guys in the vans. So if you're ever out on the street, look out for the guys in the vans. I could already feel it. But anyways, I was on the street when the COINTEL program broke apart my family, and we all separated. I'm glad we separated ways, because they was a bunch of evil people, everyone in my family. And I was listening to this lady recently who was part of the deep and part of the occult, and was giving out names like Ronald Reagan and George Bush that were eating children and all those things. And I can't remember what her name was, but I'll one of the videos that in the future I'll give you her name so you guys can check it out. And she had David Icke did an interview with her. I can't remember what her name was, but anyway, she had this long interview. She talked about the reptilians. She was a part of their a very high end part of the Illuminati rituals. And they needed her because she was somebody special. And she ratted them all out. And she talked about this gang stalking thing happened to her, where they had government vehicles following her around and stuff like that. And this was old footage back from the 80s. And she was talking about all these big, huge names. And one of the names of the main Illuminati guy's name was John Bay. Right? And my family's names are the Days. And my cousin's name is John Day. He's like my brother being raised together. This is just one of those things. And he had a big part of me not being able to succeed in my life, and all the favor and all the good positions, everything went to him and bypassed me. And so I don't know if it's our bloodline or what on my mother's side or on my dad's, but it has to do with a lot of this with bloodlines. So you guys need to remember that. And all these things that you hear about in these conspiracy stuff, it's real stuff that happened. It's like when I was 7 years old, my grandma, she was a witch. She used to go outside with me and my other cousin. And we at nighttime we'd look at the stars, right? And we would watch falling stars and stuff like that. And one night I was out there by myself, and they weren't there with me. This was down in Texas, right outside of Conroe, Texas. And I saw a UFO fly right over the top of my head, barely atop of the trees, a real UFO. And there was a U.S. Army helicopter chasing it, said U.S. Army on it. But the UFO that I saw had windows in it, right? And this dull green light coming out of it. And, but it had, the skin on it had rivets. You could see these rivets, like in steel buildings, rivets. That the skin that it had on it, it was totally like what you would see like from the 60s, flying saucer. That's what it exactly looked like. But it had 2 picture frame windows in it with this dull light. I couldn't see anything or anybody inside. I could just see this lime green light coming out of it. I thought it was, personally, now I think about it, I thought it was nuclear powered because of what happened. This is a real famous UFO story that they still talk about if you watch Ancient Aliens and UFOs and all that stuff. But this thing I witnessed it, but it landed, it was having a malfunction, and it landed on the road, and it stopped the traffic on either side of the road, and everybody got out to check it out, and they all had radiation burn, and some people died from it. You look it back up, it had to have been in the late 70s. And I saw that before it landed and everything. And I saw that U.S. Army, and I don't know what that has to do with what I saw, but I'm going to tell you right now, it was not an alien made, it was man-made. because it had the rivets. It had, what would aliens be doing with a spacecraft with windows in it? You get what I'm saying? I saw the rivets. I saw it up close because it just skimmed the top of the big pine trees, you know. The pine trees were probably less tall than that building that's across the way right there. And I mean, it was right over my head. I got a good look at it. But right after, not long after that, a couple days after that, I got real sick. And my under my arm started swelling up. My neck swelled up. All those the thyroids or the things. I went to the doctor, but I got over it. I think I was, you know, radiated. What was it doing flying over showing me that anyway? And then we leave from there, and then we lived in this place called Cut and Shoot, Texas. Cut and Shoot, literally. That was the name of the town. Look it up. Cut and Shoot, Texas. And those helicopters would fly at night, and I go down to the creek down there during the day because we was poor and I was always down in the woods in the creek fishing or messing around fishing. And I would find those cattle mutilations down there all the time. My whole life, it was like something like that going on. Cattle mutilations, ghosts, paranormal stuff happening everywhere. And I would find these mutilated cows, you know, all the time. And they'd be, you know, their udders would be gone, or their genitals would be gone, or they'd have these weird scoop marks, and their butts would be gone. Something would suck. You know what I'm saying? They were taking parts off of them. And that was, you know, that was probably when they started deciding they was going to poison everyone or something, the meat, you know. I had no idea. But I just know I was around it. So all this stuff my whole life, the aliens and the cattle mutilations and all that stuff was right up my alley because I got to witness it firsthand. It was always happening around me. Whatever that means. And so, you know, I was on the street, and finally there's this place called Isaac's House in Victor, Montana. I went there. This guy named Jim Landis ran it. He's a Southern Baptist or something like that. And he used to threaten me. He used to always want me to read the Bible and then come to talk to him, and everything I would tell him that I read that week, he would use it in his sermon that he preached. He took in wayward guys that were kind of in trouble and, you know, gave them a place to stay, but it was horrific. It was basically satanic ritual abuse. Called Isaac's House. Look it up. Victor, Montana. Jim Landis. And I escaped from him, and I went down to Hamilton, Montana. Now in Hamilton, Montana, it's about 45 miles south of Missoula, Montana. There's this place called Big Sky Christian Center. I went there. I met the guy who ran the place. His name was Harris Himes. Look him up. Now Harris, let me tell you, he was some kind of a character. He was a colonel in the Vietnam War. Now this, remember the military and all this stuff, let me tell you. And I escaped Landis down there because I had a job in town working at this lumber yard. And I knew this man. He thought he was so smart, this Harris Himes. You can look him up on YouTube. You can find him going over to Helena, which is the state capital, preaching on against the homosexuals and the transgenders and stuff. Harris Himes, look him up. But anyways, he was in trouble. And but let me tell you about this guy. He ran this place. It was like an old motel. It's called Big Sky Christian Center. You can find it there and look it up. The info on it. And he was a full colonel in the Vietnam War. He also went to 2 Ivy League colleges. So he always thought he was smarter and everybody else was dumb and intelligent. But he had 2 degrees and he was a highly intelligent man, you know, when it came to the things of the world. He was a lawyer that had a multi-million-dollar lawyer firm in California. Yeah, he owned a big building in a lawyer firm. And also on top of that, he went to seminary school and became a pastor. But then he went back to seminary school and taught. But he wasn't no normal pastor. He was a cult pastor. He's a new age. He did a little bit of everything, hodgepodge of. He believed in some Mormon. He had some Mormon books and this book. And, you know, when the normal pastors were around, he would preach a normal sermon. But as soon as they was gone, he would be telling you God was trying to learn and all this crazy whacked out shit, you know. But he thought he was so smart. I had him figured out. It was just about money. He was always taking advantage of somebody. But anyways, he was in trouble and he was in jail on the weekends or during the week. Why? Because he conned these Christians out of their inheritance for $150,000. The town hated him because he would go down there and talk about homosexuals at the state capitol. But then he got caught, you know, ripping people off. He created his own business down in Mexico and told these people they wanted to know where it would be some good money to invest this inheritance they had. And they invested it in him. He took their money. But he was that lawyer, that big-time lawyer, so they were always trying to get him with something, but he was so slick with the laws and everything. They had him going to jail, but he'd only go a couple days at a time, but the rest of the week they'd let him out. Then he had to go check himself back in, you know. It was hilarious. And of course I was involved with, you know, some other churches in town and stuff like that. And I mean, it was a big deal and it was very strange and bizarre, but he had this right-hand man in there named Parker. And Parker was completely demon-possessed, dude. He was a military guy, too. He was in the Army, and Harris was a Marine colonel in the Vietnam War. But Parker, his right-hand man, this guy was fucking nuts, man. He would talk to himself. I remember he would sing songs to me as he was, I lived there for 2.5 years without no wheels. And finally, that man, Harris, bought me a truck. And I got the hell out of there. And that's what got me homeless in a vehicle. But I needed to get out of there because of all the crazy shit that was happening to me. But in that town, but Parker, let me tell you about him. He was completely nuts. At nighttime, you would hear him scream. Bloody murder, like I'm burning, he would say, I'm burning, you mother, you son of a... That just is a horrible cussing you ever heard all night freaking long. And everybody in there was some kind of warlock. They didn't let women there. It was a man's facility. And every one of them was some kind of warlock from somewhere different and all of them were military, ex-military. Horrible. Some of them spent 20 years for murder in the military. But in that town of Hamilton, you can look it up, there's a level 4 lab there. And they were experimenting on everybody around there with that voice of God technology, all that stuff. And man, I had a hell of a time living there. And that's pretty much what started my journey from leaving there, all the crazy stuff that happened to me. So I was just figure I would tell you a little bit about some of the strange warfare things that I've been through, and that, you know, if you have some weird stories yourself, that you're not crazy because of all the crazy stuff that was happening to you in your life. And this is just a testimony of the strange things that happened to me. A small testimony. I'll tell you more later of the strange things that happened to me in my life, but all of it is true. So have a good one. See you later. Bye.